right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Today, we are talking about fancy Caridina shrimp.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, they're like little jewels,
Yeah.
right? And like you see them in aquariums and stuff, and they are just these dazzling, beautiful creatures.
Yeah, just incredible colors.
But like, how did they even get that? Like, they're so different from those little algae eaters we think of when we think of shrimp, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, they started as kind of these, like you said, these algae eaters, these really hardy creatures that people use to just help clean up their aquariums.
Right.
And through decades, people were breeding them.
Yeah, for the looks.
For the looks.
Yeah.
So then you start to breed the prettiest ones together, and then you get even prettier offspring, and then you breed those.
Wow.
And so over time, these colors have been amplified, and
Yeah.
the patterns have become more intricate. And
that's got to be like a really long process, right? Like to get them to look like that?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is not something that happened overnight. No decades of work from breeders all over the world.
So it's really interesting, though, because you would think with all those like crazy colors and patterns
Right.
that they would be like super strong.
You would think. They look very vibrant. You'd think they'd be,
Yeah.
very strong creatures.
Like they almost look kind of dangerous, you know?
All right. Don't mess with me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
But I heard that they're actually kind of delicate.
they are, unfortunately.
Why is that?
Well, if we really want to understand the reason behind their kind of fragility, we have to go back to their roots.
Okay.
And like their origin story is actually kind of crazy.
Okay.
Pretty much those crystal red shrimp, blue bolts, all those fancy ones.
Yeah.
They can all basically be traced back to like a single breeding operation in Japan
Oh, wow.
that started with just 3 shrimp.
What? Really?
Yeah, just 3.
3 shrimp.
That's it.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
So like all the shrimp we see are like related to those 3?
Pretty much.
Wow, that's like the ultimate family reunion right there.
I know, right? It's a crazy thing.
That's so strange.
And that's where the problem comes in, right?
Okay.
You have this really, really small starting population,
Yeah.
and it creates what we call a genetic bottleneck.
Okay, a bottleneck. So like all those shrimp are like squeezed through this tiny opening.
Well, exactly. You got it.
Okay, I get it. So instead of having like a big gene pool, it's more like a puddle.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
very fancy, colorful puddle.
Right. But a puddle nonetheless.
Exactly. And just like a puddle can dry up pretty quickly, that lack of genetic diversity makes these shrimp very susceptible.
That makes sense. So all those amazing colors we love are actually a sign of their kind of fragility.
In a way, yes.
Huh. It's almost ironic, like we're so drawn to their beauty, but it came at a cost.
It's a bittersweet when you think about it.
It really makes you appreciate the dedication of those early breeders even more.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, talk about a labor of love.
For sure.
Speaking of which, we have to talk about Mr. Suzuki, the kind of godfather of Caridina shrimp.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Suzuki. He wasn't just breeding shrimp. He was creating masterpieces.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, his attention to detail was incredible. Meticulous record keeping, carefully selecting which shrimp to breed with which.
Wow, like a matchmaker, but for shrimp.
Exactly. And it was through this meticulous work that he developed the iconic crystal red shrimp back in 1996.
The crystal reds, those were like the Beyonce of the shrimp world.
Oh, totally. They were like nothing anyone had ever seen before. This stunning, almost translucent red, like little gemstones swimming around.
And people went crazy for them, right? Weren't they selling for like thousands of dollars?
Oh, yeah, they were going for a pretty penny. I think at one point, a single crystal red shrimp sold for something like $8,000.
$8,000 for a shrimp.
Can you believe it?
That's more than I paid for my car.
Right. It just goes to show the level of passion and I think the artistry involved.
It really is like art.
It is. Each shrimp is like a unique creation.
That's amazing. So we have Mr. Suzuki over in Japan, meticulously crafting these crystal red masterpieces. But the story doesn't end there, right?
Yeah.
What was happening over in Taiwan around the same time?
Ah, Taiwan. That's where things get even more interesting. While the Japanese breeders were all about purity and refining specific traits,
Right.
the Taiwanese breeders were like, let's shake things up a bit.
Oh, yeah. How so?
They embraced hybridization.
Hybridization, like mixing different types of shrimp together.
Exactly. Instead of focusing on just one lineage, they started experimenting with crossbreeding different Caridina species.
So they were like the culinary artists of the shrimp world blending different flavors to create something new.
Perfect analogy. They were after new colors, new patterns, pushing the boundaries of what a Caridina shrimp could look like.
That's fascinating. But wasn't that risky, like mixing different species? Didn't they worry about, messing things up?
Well, yeah, there were definitely some concerns about creating weaker, less viable offspring.
Right, right.
But the Taiwanese breeders had a trick up their sleeves. They started incorporating wild shrimp into their breeding programs.
Wild shrimp. Why would they do that?
Think of it like this. Those fancy shrimp, with their limited gene pools, they were like delicate houseplants.
Okay.
Beautiful, but high maintenance.
Right.
By introducing wild shrimp, which had a wider range of genes, they were essentially giving them a dose of, like, robust outdoor genetics.
Like taking them back to their roots.
Exactly.
Make them tougher.
Tougher and potentially even more vibrant.
Clever. So they were going for both beauty and resilience.
That was the goal.
But this is all starting to sound pretty complicated. With all this breeding and crossbreeding going on, how on earth did anyone keep track of which shrimp were related to which?
Well, for a long time, it was like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle in the dark. The world of shrimp breeding was shrouded in secrecy.
Really? Why all the secrecy?
Well, breeders were very protective of their methods, their lineages, their discoveries.
Right, like a chef guarding their secret recipe.
Exactly. It was a very competitive world.
Makes sense. So how did we finally shed some light on this shrimp family tree?
Well, like any good mystery, science had to step in with its magnifying glass.
And I'm guessing that magnifying glass was DNA analysis.
You got it. In 2008, a researcher named Dr. Wang decided to unravel this tangled shrimp family tree once and for all. He wanted to look beyond those dazzling colors and intricate patterns and see what secrets lay hidden within their DNA.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did he find?
What he found was a game changer. Turns out a lot of those fancy shrimp, the ones breeders thought were like completely different species,
Yeah.
they're actually just variations within like a handful of species.
Really?
And get this, all those species were found naturally on this one tiny little island near Hong Kong.
Hold on. You're telling me all those shrimp with all those crazy colors and patterns, they all came from like a few basic shrimp on one tiny island?
That's exactly what Dr. Wang discovered.
That's wild.
It's like finding out that, all the dogs we have today, from like Chihuahuas to Great Danes,
Yeah.
actually came from like a handful of wolves on a deserted island.
That's a crazy thought.
Right. It really puts things into perspective.
It does. So this little island was like the birthplace of all these fancy shrimp.
Pretty much.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like the Garden of Eden for Caridina shrimp.
I love that analogy. The Garden of Eden for shrimp. And, this discovery wasn't just some interesting fact.
Yeah.
It actually explained a lot about why those early generations of fancy shrimp were so hard to keep alive.
Oh, right. Because of that bottleneck thing we were talking about?
Exactly. Remember, those shrimp had such a small gene pool to begin with.
Right.
So even the slightest change in their environment, like the water temperature, even their food, could really mess them up.
That's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is, especially considering how popular these shrimp have become in the aquarium hobby.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility.
Absolutely. And speaking of responsibility, it wasn't just Dr. Wang who was hot on the shrimp trail.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, a few years later, a team of researchers in Germany, they decided to dig even deeper into this whole shrimp mystery.
Okay, what were they trying to find out?
Well, they were really intrigued by Dr. Wang's findings about the different species and variations. But instead of just focusing on the shrimp's DNA,
Yeah.
they wanted to take a closer look at their physical characteristics.
Oh, okay, so like what they actually look like.
Precisely. Their morphology.
Morphology, right, like their shape and their color patterns and all that.
Exactly. They were meticulously studying everything,
Wow.
from the shape of their bodies
Mm.
to, get this, the number of little notches on their antenna.
The notches on their antenna, that's some serious attention to detail.
I know, right?
Yeah.
These researchers were not messing around.
So what did they find out from all that?
Well, their findings were pretty amazing. They backed up a lot of what Dr. Wang had discovered about the different species.
Okay.
But they also found that some shrimp, which people thought were different species based on how they looked,
Yeah.
were actually just variations within the same species.
So even with all that close-up examination, it was still hard to tell some of them apart.
You got it. It was like trying to tell identical twins apart, but with shrimp.
Wow. That must have made things even more confusing.
It definitely added another layer of complexity to the whole thing. And to make things even more interesting, they actually renamed some of the shrimp based on their findings.
They renamed them.
Yep. Like, they found out that the tiger shrimp, which everyone thought was called Caridina serrata, it was actually a different species entirely.
Oh,
And guess what they named it?
what?
Caridina Maria, after the lead researcher's wife, Maria.
That's sweet.
It is. But I'm sure all the renaming and reclassifying probably made the shrimp family tree even harder to follow.
I would think so. So where does that leave us? Do we have a clearer picture of these shrimp now?
Well, it's an ongoing process, but each new discovery brings us one step closer to understanding these fascinating creatures.
That's true.
And the research hasn't stopped there. Just a few years ago, in 2020, Dr. Wang's team discovered 4 brand new Caridina species.
No way. 4 more.
4 more, all from that same region near Hong Kong.
Wow, that little island is like a shrimp treasure chest.
I know, right? And some researchers even think these newly discovered species might have been used in those early breeding programs,
Oh, really?
which would make things even more complicated. We may never know the full story.
It's like a real-life detective novel.
It is a shrimpy detective novel.
Well,
But as we uncover the mysteries of their past, it also makes us think about the future of these shrimp.
yeah, that's a good point. Like, what happens to these shrimp, both in our aquariums and in the wild?
Exactly. It's a question that's becoming increasingly important, especially with the rise of these non-native shrimp species being found in places like Taiwan.
Oh, you mean like those fancy shrimp escaping from aquariums and ending up in the wild?
Exactly. It seems those aquarium walls might not be as impenetrable as we thought.
Yeah, and that does make you wonder, like, what happens if those shrimp get out into ecosystems where they're not from?
Right. Like, what kind of impact could they have?
Exactly.
It's a big question that researchers are trying to answer right now.
And it's kind of interesting how we've been talking about all this secrecy in the shrimp breeding world.
Right.
Like all these, closely guarded secrets and stuff.
Yeah, the secret recipes.
Yeah. But it seems like things are changing. Like people are being more open about their breeding practices now, sharing more information.
Yeah, definitely there's been a big shift towards transparency.
Why do you think that is?
I think it was partly out of necessity. Those fancy shrimp we talked about.
Yeah.
They got a reputation for being really hard to keep alive.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. Like they were notorious for that.
Right. And breeders started to realize that, if their customers kept losing their shrimp,
Mm-hmm.
it would be bad for business.
That makes sense. It's like if nobody can keep your shrimp alive, nobody's going to buy them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there was this realization that, we need to work together, share our knowledge, and figure out how to make these shrimp more resilient.
So it's like a win-win for everyone. Share the knowledge, healthier shrimp, happier customers.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And it seems like this new era of openness has actually led to some really cool discoveries. Like, remember those genetic maps we talked about?
Oh, yeah, the shrimp fingerprints.
Yeah. Those have been a game changer for breeders, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now breeders can actually see, the genetic makeup of their shrimp.
Wow.
They can make more informed decisions about which ones to breed together, which helps them create stronger bloodlines.
So it's like shrimp matchmaking, but with science.
I love it. Shrimp matchmaking with science.
Hmm.
And, the best part is it's not just about preserving the amazing shrimp we already have. It's also opening up possibilities for new discoveries, new colors, new patterns.
So you could see even more incredible shrimp in the future.
Exactly. We're talking shrimp that are not only beautiful, but also healthier and more resilient.
Now that's something to get excited about. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from those humble little algae eaters to like the world of genetics and the ethics of releasing animals into the wild.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. Who knew there was so much to learn about these little creatures?
Right. They're full of surprises.
They really are. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but we want to hear from you. What surprised you most about these little living jewels? Head over to our social media and let us know. And until next time, happy shrimping.